One of the biggest VR games still to come in 2025 is NDreams Reach, or should I say Elevation Studios Reach. Elevation Studio are part of NDreams multi-studio development team, and it's Elevation that brought us Fracked, and more importantly the very excellent Phantom Covert Ops, which is arguably the best game NDreams have ever published. Elevation's job at NDreams is to push new boundaries in VR, inventing new VR technologies to stay at the forefront of showcasing what's possible in VR gaming. And I wanted to share this info because it's very easy just to say that NDreams are making this game. So I was recently invited to go hands-on with the PCVR and Quest 3 versions to share my first impressions with you all. And that means some of this feedback will obviously be subject to change for when the game fully releases on October 16th on PCVR, PSVR2 and MetaQuest 3 and MetaQuest 3S. Firstly, any of you who invest in PCVR are obviously looking for the games that really push visuals, and Reach is definitely that game. In a time when mobile VR almost has VR in a graphical chokehold due to developers still supporting Quest 2, Reach is truly a breath of fresh air, and it's not often I walk away from a demo feeling convinced that VR still has a future for the gamers who want top tier visuals and high budget VR games. And I'm pleased to say that Reach also does a lot more than simply look good. Your character's body moves cleverly in reaction to what you're doing, and your player's hands also move naturally and react correctly to whatever you're touching. And yes, Batman-y fingers make a welcome return. Your character's legs also try to grab the world realistically, but currently, at least in my demo, the legs have been a bit of a mixed bag. But it's still a welcome feature, and I'm hoping that the way the feet react to the environment is much better for the full release. For example, as you climb a surface or scrape your way through a tight gap, you'll see your entire body react realistically and adapt to the environment. And seeing your virtual avatar's feet do this correctly is pretty surreal at first. And before I get too far into my praise for Reach, I'm not saying this is something completely new to VR, especially if you've played games like Boneworks, but today I don't think any VR game I've played before has achieved this natural embodiment connection as well as Reach has. Now, some of you may find this sort of feedback or detail pretty boring, but for me, feeling physically present in a VR game is a very special thing. And if there's any game that comes to mind when you first start Reach, it's EA's Mirror's Edge, with one exception which I'll get to in a minute. The jumping, which uses both your arms flung forward in combination with pressing an A button, feels really good, and overall platforming is very satisfying, and it will feel immediately natural to everyone who's played VR. Later in the game, you'll unlock a super cool Captain America style shield, which I'm sure you've all seen in the trailers, and this will be used in puzzles, which I'll get into detail in a minute, but it can also be used to create platforms to reach normally impossible areas. The running speed feels really good, especially in combat scenarios, which I'll go into more detail again about in a minute, but annoyingly they have decided to add speed lines for when you're running, which feels completely out of place in a game that looks this good with an already decent sense of speed. And I've told the developers we would like an option to disable them because I personally find them quite a distraction and pretty immersion breaking. The other thing I wanted to do was slide under objects while running, and at the moment, and probably when the game releases, you can't. And this puts the brakes on what should feel a naturally fluid movement system, especially when Reach, in every other sense, does feel like a Mirror's Edge game in terms of movement in VR. And again, I relayed this feedback to the developers. Even so, in terms of immersion, Reach has a lot going for it. It's a fast-paced action-adventure platformer with some puzzling, and some of these puzzles are more than just a mere distraction. They can actually take a bit of time to work out, and currently Reach appears to be made of 4 parts. There's story, action, platforming, and puzzling, and in no particular order. But the story, which has me pretty intrigued, is a critical part of all of this.
Please, forgive my manners and the state of my workshop.
In Reach, you play as a character called Rosa, and you start the game as a movie stunt double, which has some excellent set pieces like explosions, jumping through windows, and it acts as the movement tutorial for the game, but it also sets the tone and the pace of what's to come. After this, you wake up under some rubble underground due to an earthquake, or at least that's what you're led to believe, and you enter some magical, hostile, forgotten world. And from here you get to do some puzzles, learn the story, and slowly unlock the weapons and items that will aid you in the adventure. In the demos I played, the main weapon is a bow, which has multiple arrow types available, your standard energy arrow, which is infinite to use, along with shock arrows, ice and fire. And you pick up the elements for these arrows from glowing bugs, which you have to squish. And the combat arenas, which I think is the correct term, have multiple enemy types and a sort of mini brain boss that powers the shields of all the rest of the enemy. If you take down the mini brain boss first, the enemies are easier and appear to respawn less, but you can also just go ham on everyone with the shields up which does obviously take longer, and it is definitely more difficult, but it can be done. But you will still have to kill the mini brain boss dude who is hiding somewhere from you for you to progress through the level anyway. And these arenas are multi-staged, encouraging you to use your hookshot to fly around and therefore find strategic ways to beat them all without dying. And your health is managed by collecting yellow mushrooms for an injector device that is constantly attached to your chest. The enemy AI appears to be very smart, at least on whatever difficulty the developers put me on, and they never let up chasing you. You can disable the enemy using different bow types. For example, if you use the shock arrow, you can then hook shot the weapons out of their hands and then use them against the enemy. So far I've used a pistol and a shotgun, and they both felt really good to use. On one of the stages there was a turret which I eventually managed to grab and use myself, and you can also sneak up to the enemy and pull their spine out, killing them instantly. These combat arenas are actually very cool and almost like a side quest challenge that you want to replay again, because the more you play, the quicker and more efficient you become using all the weapons and equipment. Shield obviously protects you, but it can also be used to stun the enemy, and it feels incredible to use. Throwing it around the stages and watching it bounce off the walls is a super cool feeling all on its own. The shield also plays a huge part in the puzzles and is needed to activate switches, which are sometimes on a timer. It can also act as a key, but you will have to power it up via some electrical shield slot at first, and that again is on a timer. And again, most of this involves platforming. So I think now's a good time to talk about how the Quest version shapes up in terms of graphics versus the PCVR version, because as I said, on PCVR this game looks top tier, but as you would expect, the Quest version is a different beast. Luckily, from what I've played so far, the Quest version is a mix of good, impressive and not so impressive, and to its credit, I think they've done a great job porting Reach almost one-to-one. But there's obviously trade-offs, and right now the most standout negative is the heavy use of asynchronous space warp to keep the game running decently, and this really depends on what's going on in the headset. Your hands, for example, have like a horrible wavy effect, and there's plenty of popping, making some parts of the levels simply appear out of nowhere.
The helicopter, take cover!
However, I do trust NDreams on their porting process to Quest, judging by their previous games. And in regards to PSVR2, I've got no doubt this will look as good as it does on PC, but will most likely use reprojection as they did with Synapse. But Synapse is probably the best use of reprojection I've experienced on PSVR2 so far, so I'm not worried if that does turn out indeed to be the case. We have to keep in mind all of this feedback is not on final build quality, and graphics and optimization are the last things developers do before a game releases. But obviously I have to report on exactly what I've played and experienced so far. So on to my final thoughts. Reach has every opportunity to be one of the best games ever. It's got incredible graphics, brilliant set pieces, interesting puzzles, and very challenging combat, and I personally can't wait to play more. I am hoping the Quest 3 version does get some more optimization though. Even if it needs a slight delay, I believe it will be worth it. And I'm also looking forward to checking out the PSVR2 version very soon. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you to everyone who likes and subscribes. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.